Welcome into the latest edition of the Sharps Report. My name is Matt Peralt. You guys probably know me from the Daily Juice podcast, but we are talking to bookmakers, line makers, and market makers every single week to bring you behind the counter and inside everything happening in the wonderful world of sports gambling. Our guest this week is a guy who I've known quite a long time. I've done a lot of podcasting with him over the years. He is Robert Walker. He is a guy who has been heavily involved in sports gambling for a long time, and he is joining us this week on the Sharps Report. Robert, Matt Peralt, how are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for the time. So tell me a little bit about where your company is right now and what you guys have gone through, because you've gone through a change. You guys have gone through a merger, if you will, but where are you guys? U.S. bookmaking is where you were, but where are you guys now?
Well, we were acquired by Ellis Gaming Technology, and that's the old New Geico company out of Italy, and so they have like a really nice platform. We vetted so many platforms over the years, Matt, and we might have talked about it. There's so many platforms, and there's so many good platforms, and all of them are, have their strengths and weaknesses. But we're really excited here because this was a retail platform, and most of them are they start with the mobile, and then they said they can add retail. We're mostly a retail centric book. We have 3 in New Mexico, a couple in Michigan, a couple in North Dakota, or 1 in North Dakota, I should say, and then moving, into DC and elsewhere. So this is really important to us. So, it's an exciting time. They're working on the mobile. The mobile will probably be ready, in due time, and then we'll be able to. The most important thing is we're going to be able to control pricing and go into these places and have our own platform. It's a really hard business when you are competing against the platform that you have to go and say how much you're going to charge us for this platform, right? And then we're all competing for the same bids and stuff. So it's an exciting time. I told you off air, I'm going to Rome this. I keep saying Reno. I'm going to Reno this week. I'm going to Rome this Sunday for 10 days. I'm very excited to learn the back end of their system and their platform. John Salerno was back there a few weeks ago and just loved it. So I'm really excited to see it and train on it and see how, we can bring it to the U.S., because the quicker we bring it to the U.S., the better we all are. So, how has the application process for you guys going state by state? What have you guys learned? How has it gone as you guys have looked to expand into the states that have legalized? Well, I think we have a niche. Our niche is really, to white label tribal casinos that, don't really want to be, one of the bigger companies. They want to, be autonomous. So we're behind the scenes. So I mean, it's a slow process, for us. We've purposely avoided going into the states where we're having to compete against, the bigger conglomerates that don't, that are the acquisition costs matter just through the roof, as you know, and it's a great time to be a player. But for us, we operate the way we always operated. We try to bring it to the bottom line, try to offer value to the players, but not in the form of, acquisition signups and bonuses and free play. We think that's going to play out in the next couple of years, and then people will start to see the value in having a better line, having a 16-cent line, having a better in-game wagering, not eliminating players. We're still stuck on the fact that we don't kick anybody out. We may lower their limits to where it's, they don't decide what we do on that particular game. So that's kind of our mindset, which is not the way it's working right now. So, we've made that. So we rolled out, we're looking at, multiple jurisdictions. We're trying to get, obviously we'd love to get into Washington, Oregon, Canada, obviously. So, we're talking to every jurisdiction, and, we're going to have a B2C eventually here, and we'll announce that shortly. And that'll be our first really foray, challenging the big boys and going in there. And it's fairly daunting, because like I said, it's when people don't care about the, how much they spend. It's a really weird situation. We think there's going to be some consolidation. I'm sure you've heard that. You've heard people talk about it. There's going to be some consolidation. You can't keep spending this kind of money. I think look at Las Vegas, how, the Strip consolidated. And one of the reasons why is everybody was trying to, there's a lot of reasons why. One is you save a ton in payroll and you have duplication of effort, but also you're not, paying a ton of money for the same person. sort of the same gambler. So I think the same thing will happen here. Yeah, it may take a few years, but I definitely see that happening.
When you guys go into new states, you mentioned the sign-up bonuses. You try to stay away from those quick fixes, if you will, the short-term grab. How long have you seen it where the betting public comes around to the idea that that's not a long-term winning strategy, rolling that number over consistently, that it looks great on the surface until you kind of dig down deep and you're like, this doesn't look how it normally does?
So I think there's going to be a group of people that are always into bonuses. I think if you look at Europe, there's websites that show you how to manipulate and play this game, right? Where you're constantly, I get a bonus here, I can lay it off here. So we think when the market becomes a little more mature, when they understand, so when you're going down there and you say, listen, you can lay $1.08 with U.S. bookmaking, that doesn't resonate to a new player. They don't know what that means. And, we try to tell them what that means is your 14 parlay pays a lot more. We don't have a pay chart, it's true odds. So, we basically are bonusing every bet that you make. You're laying at, $10.80 to win 10 or $10.50 to lay 10. So that doesn't resonate now, but it will. As the people get more savvy, I would say, they would understand that, hey, this team has the best numbers out there. And there's a few of us trying that market, obviously Circa, Westgate, we all have the kind of same mindset. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's Vegas centric, right? That has that mindset, because Vegas is the most mature market of all in the U.S. Yeah. So I think you'll get a eventually the 23-cent lines, some of these lines that are, you saw Montana's lines and stuff that are just abysmal beyond belief. So eventually the player will understand that, hey, that's not a good deal for us. We're better off going to a movie than putting a bet on this game. So I think that when that starts to happen, I think that we'll get our fair share. We're never going to get everybody, and nor do we desire that. The one good thing about our strategy, though, is being a retail centric, is we've avoided that whole mess, because when this first started happening, we were, I think, a little shocked, and the fact that it's continued to happen is even more stunning. That we just don't know, but we don't think that you can, if you're buying retention, we know that can happen forever. Right. At some point, this is what Vic tells me. At some point, we got to make money, right? You just can't keep throwing money out. So, but there's a lot of good platforms and there's a lot of good companies out there. And, and I'm a huge fan of, the people I'm talking about right now, I'm huge fans of theirs. I mean, they've done in 3 years, it's remarkable where this industry was 4 years ago to where it's at now. And that's because of, DraftKings and FanDuel and Win and BetMGM and, they're all out there trying PointsBet. I just keep going on and on, right? But they're all trying to find their niche and increase market share and obviously increase the shareholder value. And but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the long run. I mean, I think if you talk to all us old guys, we have one opinion. If you talk to the young guys, they have a different opinion. So.
Well, I kind of want to go to your history a little bit and back to the Mirage and MGM and back to when Vegas was, the king and the only thing you guys had was Vegas. Is there any correlation to customer retention back in the day to now, or is it totally different? Like, how are you guys how are you able to keep customers and keep customers happy back then to today?
Well, see, I think that was one of the problems is we didn't do a lot from a sportsbook standpoint for retention. So basically the Mirage, the Bellagio, Treasure Island with their pirate show, those were the draws, right? The MGM Grand with their book and the way our books were structured, we had magnificent books. Those were the draw. So we didn't really have to do anything, nor did we do anything special to draw anybody. We, it sounds crazy now, but my opinion is always like, if you want to bet. If you don't, I don't care. I don't, because it was a different, and we wrote so much business back then and we were always busy. So there was really none of this, we had to do this for retention. We had to do this for, it was just a completely different world than it is now. And so to go out there and also if we had a bad day, it was, the casino made so much money, I always said, I wanted to make it hurt if the Mirage didn't do well, because that's how important the sportsbook was. But we never overcame the T-shirt sales. I mean, it just was, I think I said this before, but the roller coaster at the New York was just killing us in the sportsbook, and they went down for maintenance for a week, and I said, here's our chance to leapfrog them. So it's just it was just a different. The draw was the casino, the hotel, the restaurant, the shows, as opposed now where it's it has to be the platform, it has to be what you're offering, it has to be your odds, it has to be your customer service. How fast can you get money in on a deposit, and how fast can you get money out? Those are all the fundamentals that basically we didn't have to deal with. It's very easy to run the MGM Mirage, when you have those type of places and those type of customers that can bet 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000. So you had customers that were betting those big parlays for 10,000, like you might see right now for $10, $20 at different places. So it's just, the money was just a different era, and I don't know that it lended itself. And I blame myself. I've told you this before. I blame myself for some of this. Maybe the lion's share is we didn't have the incentive to go out there and let's get in-game wagering. Let's get them. Now the technology wasn't there yet, right? So part of that was the technology, and then part of it was the gaming control board would slap our hands and say no. Or a lot of times there's a lot of red tape when you're working at these large corporations. You'd think you'd have a good idea, and and somebody would say no. They would just say no, and we're not a test site or whatever. And so there was some frustrations. I think at some point you just say, okay, I'm not, let's just not do that. Let's just do status quo. And I think the status quo hurt us when PASPA was repealed, because New Jersey got into the iGaming part of it, and somehow iGaming got attached to sports betting. And I think you've seen some pretty poor platforms come into New Jersey as part of the iGaming situation, when we thought it would migrate the other way. It would come from Nevada on. But I mean, MGM signed with, GVC, Boyd went with FanDuel. So, I mean, you had a really some shocking, I think, developments from our standpoint on how this would play out. So
it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people over the last couple of years, and I think everyone's trying to figure out, which is going to be on Front Street, if you will. Is it going to be the online casino, or is it going to be the online sports book? Which has a bigger growth potential in your mind, just nationally speaking, generally? Which could be the bigger profit margin, the profit center for these companies? Is it going to be the online casino, or is it going to be the online sports book?
Oh, I think it's online casino. I don't think it's close. I think it's there's a lot more. It's 24/7. There's a lot more, things you can do. It's going to be interesting to see how that's marketed. But I think online gaming has I think that you'll see people, basically break even in sports just to get online gaming players. It'll be interesting to see what that retention looks like, right? So, but we're the one thing that's great about Ellis is they have a robust iGaming platform. They're in Italy right now. They're looking to expand in other areas as well. So we have that, but U.S. bookmaking, at the end of the day, our core business is only sports. We've lost some places because we didn't have an iGaming solution. We don't understand. I still to this day don't know how to play craps. It's like whenever I see somebody get paid, I don't know what happened. I have no idea. And I don't want to learn either, because I'm afraid that I'll love it and then just at the crap table all the time. But so I just I worked in the casino business for 35 years, and I don't understand the games. I don't care about anything else other than sports. So that's not just our core business. That is our business. And the one thing with the Ellis purchase is we have some autonomy. Obviously we're working them in, but we're doing what we do best and what Vic has done for years and years and years, and that's go into these jurisdictions and try to help them make as much revenue as they possibly can. And it's that's how we make our revenue. So. But it's interesting because I everybody says we're in the top of the first. I don't think the game started yet. I think that we have so much. I think this thing's going to shake out. I don't think the game has even started yet. I think that there's so much new stuff. There's so much good technology. I think it's maybe they're singing the national anthem or something. But I don't. This is going to play out. I think in the next 5 years or so. And I don't know that we'll recognize. And remember, technology is getting so much better. The one thing that happened is we had these legacy technologies. And, I made this comment the other day to somebody that, imagine if I walked into your room and I said, listen, I have these 2005 laptops. I know you're looking for laptops. I got these 2005. I can unload them on you, and you'd laugh at me, right? But yet we're going in, there's these legacy sportsbook platforms that are that old, and we're trying to, you're trying to sell them to these people. So I think what happens, you're going to see just a tremendous amount of new technology come out, and data feeds are going to be really robust, and algorithms are going to be very sophisticated, where you don't have to necessarily kick out a sharp player because they're just way better than these data feeds are, or these algorithms are. So I think that's the way it's going to play out. And if it doesn't play out that way, Matt, then it doesn't matter, because it's all going to be peer-to-peer anyway. If we can't manage this and figure this out, a way to book everybody and accommodate everybody, it's going to be taken out of our hands at some point.
So you think a peer-to-peer platform could be successful? For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, basically, like, you have a platform, you say, I'm going to bet $100, who wants it for -110, and someone says, I'll take it for -110, I'll be on the other side. You think that has legs potentially?
I think it does. There's a couple of issues with it, and one is, how do you parlay, right? You still want to parlay tees, bet the derivatives. So the liquidity is a big problem. I think the other problem is the Wire Act. Can it work with that Wire Act? When I say peer-to-peer, I think I'm leaning towards more of a Robin Hood model. Something along those lines, but it doesn't have to be that way. Right? It doesn't have to be that way. It just becomes a matter of, this thing of us against the book is just ridiculous. I got to beat the book. They're this evil empire. It's just so funny. And it's crazy because everybody hates the book. I mean, and it's gotten magnified now, where it used to be where the pros would come in and say, they'd bet a game and they'd say, hey, LeBron James is out, just so you know. And then you say, hey, thank you. They'd make their bet, and they would leave, but they wouldn't let you get hit 100 times by everybody else. That ship has sailed. It's just us against the book, and I cry with the best of them. I mean, I think it's a prerequisite to get into this business. You have to be able to cry and moan and be pessimistic. And I've always said, we were having a bad few weeks, and I told my boss, I said, just so you know, I'm a bad winner. Also, you just never seen it. You don't know that yet about me. But I think, the reality is, a bookmaker, if he held 100%, he would be complaining about the handle, because it's just never good enough. So, but I just think that, this thing about, kicking players out and, removing players, I think that's a European thing to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying we didn't do it. I've lowered people. I've said, listen, you're just too good. I got to lower you. But I think my opinion is, and I could be wildly off here, is that if you're letting a pro bet so much that he dictates or she dictates your fate on that game, well, then you're in your right to lower them, right? Because the goal is to get to the right number as quickly as possible. Well, however, I'm a firm believer in market efficiency, but how can you have market efficiency if you don't let a certain group bet? So you have to let those individuals bet to get to the right number. And I know what people are saying. Well, they're beating you, right? They're taking money from you. Well, there's a cost of doing business. If you have a data feed, you're paying for it, right? There's no difference in my mind from a data feed to letting the pro players play. Just don't let them play enough where they dictate you. So the WNBA is the example I always use. If you're taking, if they're betting $1,000 on it and that's your whole decision, well, that's too much, right? Mm-hmm. Lower that. They understand it. And the NFL, you can take a lot more because you have a lot more money. So I think this myopic view of saying, hey, they're beating us here. Now there's a different group. There's a group that's beating you to the punch, right? There's the game moved from 3 to 4 and you're still sitting at 3. But I think they serve a purpose as well. I think they're telling you, listen, your person's not looking at the game. Your data feed is slow. Get rid of the person or shore them up or get a different data feed. So I think there's a learning process for every single mistake and every single time you get beat. And I don't think it's crossing that person off and getting rid of them because, if I kick you out, then your wife comes on, and then I kick her out, and then 20 years from now your daughter comes on. So I mean, where does it stop? I mean, so so it's just, but that's, once again, that's an old time, probably Vegas view that not everybody shares. But I just don't think you can have a market number. I used the Super Bowl a few years ago when everybody got crushed on the Super Bowl, but they didn't move the number. They were like, we're buried on it, but nobody wanted to move the number because that was the market number. If you're getting play on the other side and nobody moves it until the first person moves it, then that's clearly not a market number. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting philosophically how this is going to play out. But like I said, I just think it hasn't been written yet, and we're very excited to go with Ellis because we think, first of all, we have a shared vision. It's like they've been in our office the last few years. It's unbelievable. And Vic is so, great to work with, and they're great to work with. And so far, how these things go, but so far it's been fantastic. And it's just given us a chance to go into other jurisdictions and the potential to do a B2C deal if we think it makes sense also is in the cards. But like I said, everything is just, it's just so new. And I mean, look at the industry is really 3.5-4 years old now. I mean, that's it. Forget Nevada. So
it's you mentioned the Westgate and Circa and what they're doing, and market makers, if you will, or line setters who set the marketplace. Do you see somebody on a nationwide basis in the future, maybe not now, 3-4 years down the road, being willing to take numbers and not be completely homogenized, that they're willing to set a number that might be a half a point up or down compared to where the market is, and be comfortable taking that position, knowing that, okay, we like our number, we don't care where the market is, we like our number?
I think there'll be a level of sophistication, but on that number. So you have to say, listen, this number is really good. We've figured it out. Everything is correct. If it's that good, it'll become homogenized because everybody will move towards it.
Okay.
So what's going to happen is you're going to say, hey, listen, every time we get hit, we're moving towards that group's number. Let's just get closer to it. Let's get closer to it. We were the opening number at the Stardust for, when I was there for 5 years, and before the internet came in from 91 to 96. And it was nuts. I mean, it was crazy because there was nothing else out there. We're the first number out there. We had, several lines. We keyed off of Roxy, obviously, and Las Vegas Sports Consultants. And, we had Kenny White and about 5 or 6 other numbers that we paid for. And I made a number, which was the worst of the 7 always. And especially in baseball, it was just a nightmare. But, it's a formula. So we kind of made our own numbers. And then, Joe Lupo took over after I left, and Bob Scucci after he left. But now we don't have to do that, right? So you're looking at different numbers, and there's no reason to be the renegade. I think there's also another component, Matt, and that is, are you managing the book for somebody else? If you are, you can't put them in a position where you're that aggressive unless they have a reason they want to be. So, you're managing their risk. You want to keep them in a harm's way. It's different if you're Circa Westgate, when I was at the Mirage, where that's your money, that's your company's money, if that's what you guys want to do. And it might be just you want the advertising for the number. You want to be known as the number that was the originator. That's different. But like in our business, we manage risk for other people. So there's times when I've heard this saying that there's it's better to have the wrong number than no number. And I don't think that's correct at all. I think that's to me is somebody talking about that they don't care about their company's money. They're working for somebody else. And my take is, if LeBron James, you don't know if he's playing or not, and let's say he's worth 8 points in his heyday or something, and so you put up 4, you split the difference. I don't think that makes any sense because I think the pros now if you're not booking the pros, if you kick them all out, then of course you could put up 4. In that case, you'd probably put up 6 because you just assume that the public thinks he's playing. But I think you have to know if he's in or out, and not every player is like that, right? But I mean, when you have a quarterback, you just can't. We're in a quandary with Dak. Dak right now, and is he going to play? Is he not going to play? When's he going to be able to come back? And he's worth a ton of points on that team. I don't know that he's worth a ton of points on every team, but on that team, he's worth several points. That's the difference between when you work for the Mirage, and I could hang a number. And if we got beat, then it was just us that got beat. But when we're managing, multiple properties, I don't see how you can be a renegade. I don't see how you could put out numbers that, so you got to make sure you're not doing anything for ego too, because ego is the killer in this business. Whenever you think you're smarter, I've been humbled so many times that I already know I'm not smarter. I look around the room. I'm not the smartest guy in that room, but I managed to make sure that I've learned from every mistake. Don't do that same mistake again, and then let the really good players tell you what you should be doing or where you need to show up. And I think that's really, I always tell my guys, we don't have to come up with great ideas. We have to recognize great ideas, and and not say that, just dismiss anything, and look into that. Maybe that makes sense, and don't. I would say after all these years, and it's been since 1986, 85, that the one thing I've learned is, listen, look, and learn. And like I said, the wise guys to me, I'm not supposed to say wise guys, I keep doing that. The sharp players to me they'll tell you everything you need to know, and it's just
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Roxy Roxborough, and Kenny White, and yourself, and guys who have been in this game, Vic Salerno, for a really long time. Is it strange that the new companies aren't recognizing that professional players serve a purpose, that there is some type of ecosystem involved here, and just going after the $25 public player is great in the short term, but in the long term that there may be problems with just going after that one specific type of gambler?
Well, we look at I think so. I understand that. I mean, that's a high hold, high margin. I've had this conversation that, here's what we hold. Well, then you look at their lines, and it's clearly they have a 30-cent line, so they have a 6% hold, or they have a 8% hold. And in this marketplace, it's just not competitive, right? So even if you're dealing to those smaller players, I don't know why you'd want to, I don't want to say gaff, but I think you have to be competitive, or else they will play with the bookie down the street or whatever. But I think it's way too early. So my take on this whole thing is that the pros are beating you is because your technology hasn't caught up, or you have a weakness somewhere, whether it's the data feed. The one thing that's interesting is the automation. The automation. We've talked to people that say, we're completely automated and we have 30 bookmakers, and we're like, well, what are they doing? I mean, what are they doing? I don't know what they're possibly, it's just, so there's like a disconnect on what we think as a bookmaker is in Nevada, and what a bookmaker is in Europe. So I'm clearly, in my mind, it's clear that, that you use a market number, which would be a consensus number, which would be a homogenized number, like you were saying, until you get a wager. And once you get a wager, then the bookmaker reacts, right? And I don't think you stay at the number, because if your limits from your partners are, a set amount, and you leave it, or the data feed leaves it, well, then you've just doubled your limits possibly for that partner. So you have to move that number or do something. That doesn't mean you have to do something where you even get buyback, because I think buyback, we talked about, 20 years ago, even in just Nevada, buyback was kind of a misnomer. You try to be on the right number, let people bet. But I think it's getting to that right number. How do you get to that right number as quickly as possible? But the one thing about what you just said about the $25 player or the parlay player is, so the lifetime values of these players that you're talking about, and you're giving them $1,000, $5,000 sometimes up front, free play constantly to keep them churning. And what is the lifetime value of some of these players? And then everybody's after them. So everybody's after that same player. So that's what I mean. So at some point, I think that will subside, and people will start to recognize the value in a number. And so when I'm talking about the value in a number, I'm talking about a better line, hopefully, a line that we're confident in. But we can't be confident in that number until we get to that number. And and that's the way we booked the Stardust, the Mirage. when we had a sharp player that would take a position, and we got spun once in a while. I'm not saying that article that just came out that happened. That happened to us, and that's a really funny situation though, because you have the pro players that complain about the limits, but then they spin you like that, and then they want bigger limits. You're like, no, you can't. Sorry, it doesn't work both ways. There has to be I think a respect on both sides. So, but it's the whole thing is, I don't even know if that's what's going to play out, Matt, because I think it's going to be so automated. I think you are going to see homogenized numbers. I think you're going to see, nobody's going to want to stick their neck out there because what's the upside? What's the upside for a bookie to do that? And I think the most of these books aren't being run by sportsbook people. I think they're being run by customer service people and acquisition people. That's who I think is running the books right now. And how long that lasts, I just don't know.
So we're taping this here on a Tuesday. It's August the 24th. 32 years ago today, August 24th, 1989, Bart Giamatti held the press conference in which he announced that Pete Rose was going to be banned for life for baseball for betting on his own team. We're sitting here 32 years later in a completely and totally different world. I guess my first question is, what do you remember of that time back in the late 80s when things were going on and this was happening? And if someone told you, the next day, like the 25th of August on 1989, that, one day sports books and sports leagues are going to be in bed together, would you have believed it?
I would have never believed that, and I still don't. And I still think it's a terrible idea. There needs to be church and state separation between the two for any integrity to actually be real. I don't know how you perceive integrity if we're together. But I was shocked when that happened. And it seemed, I remember, I think I was at Samstown back then, or I started at the Fremont. I went back to the Fremont, but I remember thinking that this is the worst thing a manager could possibly do, because, did he bet on the Reds every single game, or when he didn't bet on them, what was the scenario? Did he manage different when he bet on them, when he didn't bet on them? But from a betting standpoint, I think everybody should bet if they want to. I think it should be legal everywhere. I mean, and people are doing it now. They always have been. You should, if it makes the game more enjoyable, obviously I'm pro gaming. I'm pro-choice for the most part. I'm hypocritical in some areas, guns, but so I was shocked when that happened, and but not any more so than when Silver embraced sports betting. I told everybody that would listen that this is a bad thing. I always thought that sports betting would be legal at some point. I thought the Bradley bill was misguided and ridiculous. No more than McCain, talking about how bad Nevada was by taking college sports and stuff. So the whole thing to me was insane. It was going to happen eventually, but then, as time went by, I was thinking, I'm probably wrong. It's never going to happen, and it'll just be stayed underground and everything else. And then so when PASPA was repealed, I was really happy, but I was also knowing the greed of the leagues. I was like, my take was they'll make their money off of increased advertising, increased viewership. Their franchises will go through the roof, and I never thought they'd come out with this integrity fee, which once again begs the question: so you're telling me with all this illegal gambling, you never had an integrity policy to begin with? It defies logic, right? So either they're lying, which they are, or they just wanted to shoo it away like they always have, like we were the worst things that ever happened in the world. So I have animosity towards the leagues because the league should do their business and let us do our business. But that's not the way it's going to end up. I mean, you could already see all the deals that are done with it's all database driven and marketing deals but please throw integrity out the window, because there's no such thing as integrity when you're partners with the leagues. There's just none. I mean, that's all going to be swept under the rug. Right now the way it works is if we see something, we say something, and we have a third party, U.S. Integrity, that we use, and we would go to them. I would never talk to the leagues about it, and I would anticipate that the leagues, if they see something or hear something, they would go to a firm like U.S. Integrity, who's a neutral third party that would look into it and see if there's something wrong. And that's how I think the public would maintain integrity. If you get rid of U.S. integrity and you just let us deal with the leagues, there'll never be a fix. This just won't happen. I mean, it'll happen, but you'll never know about it because it's all in our best interest not to talk about those things. And I always said, we're the watchdogs for the leagues. That's what we are. And I know bettors don't always believe that. They think we can make a call and we can, but I don't have that number to call, so I would never know who that person was to
the
call.
Buffalo Wild Wings number, come on.
And there's a few times when the Patriots are coming back against the Falcons, I would have made a call if I could have at that point. But there's nobody to, we want to make sure that we're impartial. I think the league should be impartial, and I think that a group like we're big fans of Matt Holt's U.S. Integrity because he provides great information for us, and it's a source we can go to without crying wolf. Without saying, I wish I would have had this source back in the day when we saw some stuff that I'm sure was fixed to this day. I'm sure there was games that are, we talked about the Toledo, we caught that scandal, but we got crushed from the public when we took the games off, and we were right, but nobody cares that we were right. We just took the games off because we knew that something was wrong, and but we didn't have that third party to go to, and going to gaming is not going to solve anything because gaming doesn't have any inside information to the league. So,
Matt Holt, who's a guy who I've known, one of the first people I ever met here in Vegas when he was at CG Technology and now opening up U.S. Integrity. You guys go to U.S. Integrity. Do the leagues go to U.S. Integrity, a third party, or do they have their own investigative people that will go into it? Because what I guess my point of the question is, and where I'm going is, are we set up for, are we protected for another Pete Rose, or is it up to the books to uncover, hey, this is what's going on? This is, and are the leagues going to blow the whistle on themselves, I guess, if we got into another situation where we had somebody of high level, like a Rose, a manager or something, doing something that's wrong?
I don't know the deals that U.S. Integrity has with the leagues themselves. I do know that they have contact and they're making contact. I believe in my mind that firms like U.S. Integrity are one of the most important firm out there. I mean, it's critical that people have confidence in the bets that they're making. That somebody's watching at all times, which is what we're doing. Hopefully, the leagues are doing it. I mean, clearly they need money to do it because they couldn't do it on their own prior to this. But hopefully, they make enough money in the future where they can actually shore this up. But I think that. It's that part's really critical because without that, all the acquisitions, everything else doesn't matter. I mean, you don't want things like the WWE or anything like that where, it's entertainment, but it's obviously, scripted entertainment, and you don't want anybody ever. I still hear people saying that all the time, and obviously on Twitter, you read some, But my thing is, I always want to tell the people on Twitter, if you think anything's fixed, why are you betting? I mean, don't. We all have bad beats, right? Yep. And, bookmakers never had a good beat. We never win a game, it feels like, but we have, and the same with the bettor. And, you lament the losses and they stay with you longer than you wish they would. But so I to uncover a Rose type thing, I think probably now with all the information, it's easier to do now than it would have been back then. I do think, though, that when you think about Pete Rose, in my mind, I know what he did, but I think Hall of Famer. I mean, well, yeah. So especially now with all the drugs and the steroids and everything else, I don't know how you keep somebody like him out. I mean, if I went to Cooperstown, I never have, but if I did, I would expect to see him there. So
his stuff is there. That's the thing about Bonds and McGuire and Rose. His memorabilia is there. He's just not there. The bust of him and the shrine to him is not there. That's always been my angle. Different podcast. Well, for the steroid cheats, that they are in the Hall of Fame. They just don't get the limelight of being on stage with the jacket on.
Yeah, so I think steroids different though, right? Because that helps you perform and get into Cooperstown. I think what Rose did was afterwards.
Correct. Right.
And but his body of work, demands that he's in there. And I'm not a Pete Rose fan.
But like Shoeless Joe Jackson and Rose and like all these guys who stained gamblers and portrayed gamblers. I mean, going back to like when professionals in the Bobby Jones era, when professional golfers were looked at as disgusting human beings, and only the pure people were the amateurs, and the Walter Hagans of the world were looked down upon, and because they played for money. Like, oh my gosh, you actually pay for money. It is wild how we've sort of just completely evolved as a society now, and some of the, now we're talking about sports gambling on the biggest of platforms, and it's, totally normal to see a line be posted on MLB Network. Here are the White Sox taking on the Yankees, and the numbers right there. And the irony is, like, you're playing on the Field of Dreams, which is where Shoeless Joe Jackson, supposedly in the movie, comes out, and you're talking about gambling, and Shoeless Joe's not in the Hall of Fame. It's just we have all these dichotomies, and we have all these hypocritical things going on right now. That, do you laugh sometimes? Do you kind of just go, "This is just ridiculous"?
It's bizarre to me right now. I mean, really, I don't recognize it. We've had, and people say, why do you have so much animosity towards the leagues? You got to remember the era that I came from. There was nothing but animosity. I mean, the NCAA, would ask us questions, and then they threw us under the bus. I remember Bill Somm specifically saying on national TV that, Vegas, they caught this fix, but they never prevented a fix. And that's just the most insane thing to say, because, it'd be like getting rid of the homicide detectives. Hey, you guys didn't prevent that murder, so we don't need you guys to go look and find out who did it. It's because, the reality is we did prevent a fix. We prevented the next one. Sarah. So, but just to listen, the hypocrisy from the leagues, they wanted to shut us down, for all these years, and said how bad it was. And, and all the while, Matt, you knew that they knew they clearly knew that people were betting on their game, and how big it was, and how big the NFL was, and how NFL can really, attribute its entire growth to gambling, I think. And 100%. So the in television, obviously television, which made more people gamble. Right. But to act like that didn't exist when you just knew that they were being untruthful. And I'm not saying all of them were, but I mean, they're saying one thing and then laughing as they walk away, because they knew, in their mind, it was all 12-year-olds that were driving the growth in these leagues. And so, I mean, that's the problem that I have. So then, I knew they wanted money. I said, they're going to come after us hard. I've already seen it with the how much money we've paid for the NFL package to show all the games at the casinos. They purposely made it for casinos because it's the occupancy of the casino, not the occupancy of the sports book. And they did that so the bars don't have to pay as much, right? So, that went up, tenfold, and it might go up now. I don't work in a casino, but so I mean, it's just, and then for them to want more money on top of this with league fees and data league fees, and it's just, we're a low margin. The reality is, I've said this many times. I don't know if the Mirage, if we had to pay for that land, that square footage, pay for the employees, pay for the lights and everything else, I don't know that we would have made hardly any money. We did well. We probably could have done better in hindsight. I look back, because every loss still wears on me. But I'm just, the cost of doing business in Nevada was very great. And like I said, we were making a dent into what the MGM Mirage's bottom line was. So, when it's frustrating for somebody like me when I see the leagues come in here and want a piece of that pie. That pie is already, it's almost gone. It's a very low margin business to begin with, and then you add these additional costs on. It's a very tough situation. And then for me to smile and say we're in bed with the leagues, I'll never do that. I'm going to be gone from this business in a few years, or whatever that looks like, and I will never ever come to terms with doing business with the leagues themselves. What
happens when the first sports team is going to happen? They control a book and they get to operate a book.
Yeah.
What happens then? Because it's happening. It's going to happen at some point in the near future. You're going to have a sports team have a controlling interest in a sports book on their property on top of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I feel like it's crazy. That's all I can tell you. It's just crazy. I mean, think about what a book, what's going to happen when you say stuff like, you take out you put a different pitch hitter in, you don't play Trout that game. the manager doesn't play Trout, I should say. And then the bettors bet on him. They bet on the Angels that night. And I use Trout because I went to Astro game to watch the Angels, and this is one game they set Trout out, and I'm still upset about it.
But they would know, though. The team would know before anybody else that the manager was planning on sitting Trout. And they would let everybody bet into that number, and then right before the game, it's, sorry. Our guy's not playing.
It wouldn't matter if they did that or not. The perception would be that, they have the ultimate insider information, right? I mean, so
I've stolen your line of separation church and state. You said it to me. Probably 2018 was the first time you said that line to me. Yeah. And I kind of said, wow, that's exactly what it has to be. And I've used that line, in a variety of radio shows and podcasts and whatnot. And not everybody understands that. Not everyone fully gets the idea of like, what's the harm if a league wants to make money off of their own product? And it's like, well, they control their product and they know what happens. Like they've got the stuff that any pro gambler would dream about. They have access to. So them running a book is really not appropriate, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's two different businesses, right? I mean, I think there's a business of sports betting, which, there's many operators out there. And then there's the leagues, which there's many teams out there. And, I don't think that any of us are saying that, we don't appreciate the leagues and, we want them to keep playing because that's the only way we can make money. But right. I think they're, like I said, the more eyes on them, they grow exponentially. You can look at their franchises, what they've grown to. I mean, what Jerry Jones bought his team for and what it's worth now. I mean, obviously that's not every case, but I mean, all the franchises go through the roof and they get more money from television. They get, those television contracts aren't going down. And, it's what drives everything. It's what allows the players to make a lot more money. So it just seems to me like a short-sighted to say I'm going to come after the sports books who are not making trillions by any stretch, and they're gambling and they can lose. For this small amount, it's obviously not the same. I'm going to butcher the analogy, but I mean, so if you have a restaurant down the street from a stadium and you paid good money for that area, right? And it's game day. Well, after the game, your revenue went up. Do you have to give the leagues a kickback for it? So it's dependent, just like the city itself is dependent on a lot of factors. But your revenue, the hotels charge more when there's a game in the city. They're charging more for that entire weekend. Are they subsidizing the books now? And I mean the leagues and everything else, or do they end up paying top dollar for that area to begin with, and which is my guess. And then most of the leagues themselves, were subsidized to even get into those cities. So
yeah, it's a great point.
So I don't know. It's just it's like I said, I'm just gonna in 5 years I'm gonna watch nothing but Oregon State and Oregon women's basketball, and I won't have to worry about this anymore.
Well, last topic that I want to get to before I let you go off to your Rome vacation. So the leagues, the NFL in particular, has made the announcement that they are going to allow 6 commercials to run per broadcast this fall for sports gamblers, for sports gambling. They are making it available, 6 spots to the 4 gambling partners that they have now signed contracts with. They're essentially picking winners and losers. How do you see that? Is that appropriate? And does that really limit the ability for smaller operations like yourself to kind of get the breakthrough content or the breakthrough exposure that you need?
One is I think the 6 is setting them up for 100, right? So we'll see how the 6 works, and then we'll charge them because it's all money. It's funny, like I did ESPN for a couple years, and I was on all 3 channels. And there was one Friday I think I was on ESPN, ESPN2. And ESPN News, for example. And the executives came down to him and said, listen, he's on constantly talking about the point spreads. He's on too much. So he called me up on a Friday and said, listen, we can't do the show anymore. And because they don't want you talking about the NFL as much as you're talking about the point spreads and stuff. I'd go on every week and then I do another segment with Berman and I think Sean, the quarterback back then or whatever it was. And it was, and I didn't like to do it anyway, so I was fine. So they said, we're not going to do it anymore. And and that's that. And I'm like, now also I sucked, so that was probably the other part of it.
Come on now.
But so I look at that, and I look at now, and it's just, and the punchline of that story was, after that happened, Fox called me up and said, we know that you're not doing that ESPN show. We'd like you to come on and do it with us now. And I'm like, and he goes, there'll be some money involved. I'm like, finally, I'm going to get paid. I go, because this is, it's a to-do, right? You got to go to a studio and do it. And then he said, yeah, we're looking for compensation from you guys. I said, you want us to pay you to do it? And I just started laughing, because I don't want to do it anyway. But he goes, yeah, we were getting rooms from this other place. We want, actual dollars from you guys. I'm like, and I knew I couldn't get paid because my company wouldn't let me get paid to do it. But it was just funny. I said, oh, thank God you said that, because I don't want to do this anyway. And because it's just you're leaving the book and everything else. And
sure.
I like to do it when you don't have to leave the book, and that's fine. But and I love doing the podcast and the shows and talking about this stuff, because this really is the interesting part to me, is the dynamics of where we're at right now, where we were, and where we could possibly be headed in the next 5 years, because technology is changing so fast, Matt, as you know, that where we can be in 5 years is just unreal to even think about, I think.
Robert, thank you for the time. Enjoy your trip to Rome. Congrats on the new gig you guys have going on. Have a great time. Enjoy the football season. I'm sure we'll catch up at some point down the road.
Thanks, Matt, for having me, and you have a great year as well. Thank you.